My name's Liam Shaw. I'm 26, living in a quiet suburb just outside San Diego, California. It's not the kind of place you'd write home about strip malls, palm trees, and streets that all look the same under the endless sun. I work as an analyst at a big strategy firm downtown. It's a solid job, pays well enough to keep my one-bedroom apartment stocked with coffee and cover the rent without too much stress. Not bad for a guy who spent his college years slinging sandwiches at a deli to make ends meet. I'm not complaining, the job's a step up. A real step, and I'm grateful for it. But my life, it's simple, predictable. Wake up at 6:30, brew a pot of black coffee, hit the office, stay late crunching numbers, then maybe jog along the coast or crash on my couch with a movie. I don't go out much. Never been big on parties or chasing people. Relationships had a couple, nothing serious. Maybe I'm too guarded, or maybe I just haven't met someone who makes me want to let the walls down. The firm I work for is one of those glass tower giants, all sleek desks and people in suits who talk fast and smile less. At the top of it all is Vivian Hart, our CEO. She's 39 and the kind of woman who commands a room without saying a word. Everyone calls her the ice queen behind her back, cold, precise, untouchable. I've seen her in boardrooms slicing through presentations with a voice so sharp it could cut steel. Dark hair always pulled back, tight suits tailored to perfection, and eyes that don't miss a thing. Men twice my age can't hold her gaze for more than a few seconds. Me, I'm just a guy in the analytics department crunching data for her strategies. I've never spoken to her directly, just caught glimpses of her striding through the office or barking orders on a call. She's not someone you approach, not someone you know. That's why that night at the supermarket hit me like a freight train. It was late, maybe 10 p.m. One of those evenings where the San Diego air feels heavy with salt and heat. I'd run out of coffee filters again and needed milk for the morning. The supermarket was nearly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the kind of place that feels like it's stuck in time. I was standing between the fruit aisle and the frozen section staring at a carton of almond milk, debating if I should just get regular to save a buck. That's when I felt a hand grabbing my wrist hard enough to make me flinch. I turned and there she was, Vivian Hart, my CEO. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, darting somewhere past me. She leaned in close, her breath quick, and whispered, "Pretend you're my boyfriend. Right now. Or you're fired." I froze, my brain short-circuited. What? I managed to choke out the milk carton still dangling in my hand. Her grip tightened, nails digging into my skin. "Don't ask, just hold my hand. Smile, act natural." Her voice was low, urgent, nothing like the polished tone I'd heard in meetings. I didn't know what was happening, but the look in her eyes, raw, almost panicked, made me nod. I dropped the milk into my basket, took her hand, and forced a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Her fingers were ice-cold, trembling, and I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something expensive like jasmine and cedar. My heart was pounding, but I played along because what else do you do when your boss threatens your job in the middle of a grocery store? I followed her gaze. A tall man was pushing a cart toward us, laughing with a younger woman clinging to his arm. He had that polished look, designer jacket, slicked back hair, a grin that screamed he owned the room. The woman was all giggles, her hand resting on his like she was marking territory. Her ex-husband. I whispered, barely moving my lips. Vivian's jaw tightened. And his new girlfriend. She hissed back, her voice steady but laced with something sharp, like she was holding herself together by a thread. I didn't know her story, but I could feel the weight of it in her grip. I squeezed her hand gently, trying to ground her. "Hey, babe," I said loud enough for them to hear as they got closer. "Did you find that wine you like?" It felt ridiculous, like I was in a bad rom-com, but her eyes flicked to mine, surprised, then softened just a fraction. "Yeah, I did," she said, her voice almost convincing. She leaned into me slightly, her shoulder brushing mine, and for a second it felt real, like we were just a couple picking out groceries on a Tuesday night. We walked past the man and his girlfriend, my arm slipping around her waist on instinct. I could feel her tense, then relax, her breath evening out. The man didn't say anything, but I caught his glance, curious, maybe a little smug. The girlfriend didn't even look up. When we reached the parking lot, Vivian pulled her hand away, her posture snapping back to the CEO I knew. The night air was cool, the lot quiet except for the hum of streetlights. She exhaled long and shaky and ran a hand through her hair. "You're better at this than I expected, Liam." She said, her voice dry but with a hint of relief. I raised an eyebrow, trying to play it cool despite my pulse still racing. "So, you really gonna fire me if I didn't play along?" She looked at me, her lips twitching into the faintest smile. "No, but you should start buying coffee before you get to the office." She turned toward her car, a sleek black BMW, and walked away without another word. I stood there, milk carton sweating in my hand, her perfume still lingering in the air. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying her trembling hand, her fear, and that fleeting moment when she leaned into me like I was the only thing keeping her steady. The next morning, I walked into the office, still rattled from the night before. The glass tower of our firm loomed over downtown San Diego, all sharp edges and polished steel, just like Vivian Hart herself. I kept my head down, sipping my coffee, black no sugar, the way I always took, it expecting the day to slide back into its usual rhythm of spreadsheets and deadlines. But the memory of her hand in mine, cold and trembling, wouldn't leave me. Neither would the faint trace of her perfume, like it had stuck to my skin. I settled at my desk, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on a market analysis due by noon. That's when I saw her. Vivian strode through the office, same as always, black suit heels, clicking hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She didn't glance my way, didn't acknowledge the supermarket encounter. She was back to being the ice queen, barking orders to a project manager who was practically jogging to keep up. I exhaled, telling myself it was a one-off. A weird blip in my otherwise predictable life. Whatever happened last night was over, done. I wasn't about to chase my CEO for answers. Then at 12:03 p.m., an email pinged in my inbox from Vivian Hart, subject meeting. My stomach dropped. The message was short, my office. 1 p.m. Don't be late, no signature, no pleasantries, just her name staring back at me like a warning. I spent the next hour overthinking, my fingers tapping nervously on my desk. Was this about the supermarket? Was she actually going to fire me? Or was it just some report I'd screwed up? By the time I knocked on her office door, my palms were sweaty and I was regretting that second cup of coffee. "Come in," her voice called, sharp but calm. I stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind me. Her office was all glass and minimalism, clean lines, a single potted plant in the corner, and a view of the Pacific that made my apartment look like a closet. Vivian was at her desk, typing, her eyes fixed on the screen. She didn't look up. "Sid," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I did, feeling like a kid called to the principal's office. Finally, she leaned back, her gaze locking onto mine. Those eyes, dark, unreadable, made me shift in my seat. "The firm's annual gala is next week," she said, her tone all business. "It's a big deal. Clients, board members, investors. I need a date, someone who can make me look human." She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You did well last night. I need you to do it again. Pretend to be my boyfriend for the gala." I blinked, trying to process. "Pretend again," I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded. "I can't afford to look weak in front of these people. Not after—" She trailed off, but I knew she meant the divorce, the ex-husband, the smug guy in the supermarket. "You're good at it, Liam. You make it believable. One night. That's all I'm asking." I should have said no. I should have pointed out how insane this was, my CEO asking me to play arm candy to impress a room full of suits. But something in her voice, a crack beneath the polished surface, stopped me. "Okay," I said the word, slipping out before I could overthink it. She raised an eyebrow like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. "Good. We'll need to prep. Meet me at the Taylor on 5th Street tomorrow after work. 6 p.m. She went back to her laptop, dismissing me without another word. The next week was a blur of preparation. I met her at the Taylor, a fancy place with velvet curtains and a guy who measured my shoulders like he was solving a math problem. Vivian stood nearby, arms crossed, approving a charcoal suit that cost more than my rent. "It suits you," she said, her voice neutral, but her eyes lingering a second too long. We practiced handshakes, fake smiles, even small talk about the weather to sell the act. "Don't call me Ms. Hart," she told me one evening in her office, the city lights glowing outside. It's Vivian when we're out there. I nodded, trying not to notice how her guard dropped when she said it. But it wasn't just the prep that got under my skin. It was the glimpses of her I wasn't supposed to see. One morning I caught her checking the weather app, muttering about reminding the team to bring umbrellas for a client meeting in case it rained. Another day I saw her outside the building kneeling to pet a stray dog, her face softening as she called animal control to pick it up. And late one night when I was grabbing files from the office, I found her alone at her desk staring at a financial report, but with a jazz playlist, humming softly from her phone. She looked up, caught me watching, and snapped, "Don't you have work to do?" But there was no venom in it, just a flicker of something, maybe embarrassment, maybe something else. By the end of the week, the lines were blurring. The fake smiles felt less fake. The way she brushed my arm when we practiced walking together didn't feel like acting. And when she asked out of nowhere, "Do you ever feel alone in this city, Liam?" I answered honestly, "Yeah, work keeps me busy, but it doesn't fill the quiet." She looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "I know the feeling," she said, almost too quiet to hear. Then she turned away back to her CEO self. But that moment stuck with me like a crack in her armor I wasn't supposed to notice. The gala was coming, and I wasn't sure what scared me more, the idea of pretending or the fact that I wasn't sure I wanted to pretend anymore. The night of the gala arrived like a storm I hadn't prepared for. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror adjusting the tie on the charcoal suit Vivian had picked out. It fit like it was made for me, but I felt like an imposter, like a kid, playing dress up in a world that wasn't mine. The San Diego skyline glittered outside my window, a reminder of the stakes clients, board members, investors all watching. I was just an analyst, a nobody in a room full of somebodies, but tonight, I had to be Vivian Hart's boyfriend. Or at least act like it. My phone buzzed with a text from her downstairs in 10. "Don't keep me waiting." I grabbed my keys, took a deep breath, and headed out. Vivian's black BMW was idling outside my apartment complex, sleek and silent under the streetlights. When I slid into the passenger seat, I nearly forgot how to breathe. She was stunning. A deep forest green dress hugged her frame, the kind that looked effortless but probably cost more than my car. Her hair was loosely pinned, a few dark strands framing her face and her eyes. Those sharp, unreadable eyes held a softness I hadn't seen before. "You clean up well, Liam," she said, her voice dry, but with a hint of a smile. I managed a grin. "Not as well as you." She rolled her eyes but didn't reply, pulling the car onto the road toward the hotel. The gala was at a swanky downtown venue, all chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The room buzzed with power men in tuxes, women in gowns, the clink of champagne glasses like a soundtrack to wealth. Vivian looped her arm through mine as we entered, her touch light but steady. "Don't stare too much," she murmured, her breath warm against my ear. "They'll think you're nervous." I chuckled low. Too late for that. She squeezed my arm, and for a moment it felt like we were in on a secret no one else could touch. We worked the room like a team. I shook hands, smiled at the right moments, and tossed out small talk about the weather or the Padres' latest game. Vivian was in her element, charming, sharp, deflecting questions about her personal life with a laugh that sounded real but wasn't. But I noticed things others didn't. The way her fingers tightened on my arm when a board member mentioned her new direction after the divorce. The way her smile faltered just for a second when someone asked if she was finally moving on. I stepped in each time, redirecting with a joke or a question, and she'd shoot me a glance, grateful, maybe surprised. When the band switched to a slow jazz number, Vivian tugged me toward the dance floor. "We need to sell this," she whispered, her hand sliding into mine. I placed my other hand on the small of her back, feeling the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her dress. We moved together, not perfectly, but close enough to look convincing. The lights dimmed the music, soft and swaying, and for a moment the room faded. It was just us. "Liam," she said, her voice barely audible over the saxophone, "don't you think this is strange?" I looked into her eyes, closer than I'd ever been. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice low, "but I don't want it to stop." Her breath hitched, and for the first time I saw her falter, not as the CEO, but as a woman who didn't have all the answers. We didn't kiss. That would have been too much too obvious. But the way she leaned into me, her forehead brushing my shoulder for a fleeting second, felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. The song ended and we pulled apart, but her hand lingered in mine as we returned to the crowd. Over the rest of the night, we talked. Really talked. She told me about her marriage, how her ex-husband had left her for someone younger because she was too consumed by her career. I built this company, she said, her voice quiet but fierce, and he made me feel like it was a mistake. I shared my own story growing up with a single mom working odd jobs to help pay bills, always chasing stability over dreams. I get it, I said. You do what you have to, and sometimes it costs you. She looked at me, her eyes searching. Not everyone sees that. As the night wound down, we stepped into the hotel's elevator to leave. The doors closed, sealing us in silence. I could still hear the faint hum of the gala behind us, but it felt a world away. Thank you, Liam. She said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. Tonight wasn't terrible. I grinned, leaning against the wall. High praise from the Ice Queen. She laughed a real laugh, warm and unguarded, and for a moment I saw the woman from the supermarket vulnerable and real. Our eyes met and something shifted. Not pretend, not acting. Something true. I reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. Vivian. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This doesn't feel fake anymore. She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened around mine, and that was enough. When the elevator doors opened, we stepped out into the cool night air, still holding hands. The city sparkled around us, but all I could think about was her laugh, her warmth, the way she made me feel like I was more than just an analyst in her world. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I wasn't ready for it to end. The week after the gala felt like walking on a tightrope. I went back to my desk, back to my spreadsheets, but everything was different. Vivian's laugh from that night, the way her hand fit in mine, the look in her eyes when I said it didn't feel fake, it all played on a loop in my head. I caught myself glancing toward her office door more than I should, hoping for a glimpse of her, a nod, anything. But she was back to being the Ice Queen, striding through the office with that untouchable air. No emails, no meetings, no mention of the gala. It was like we'd never danced under those chandeliers, never shared secrets in the elevator. I told myself it was for the best. She was my CEO. I was just Liam Shaw, the analyst who got too close to the sun. Then it all came crashing down. It started with a whisper, literally. I was grabbing coffee in the break room when I overheard two colleagues by the water cooler. Did you see the photo from the gala? One said, smirking. Vivian Hart and that analyst kid. Way too cozy. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to believe it, but by lunch my phone buzzed with a group chat notification. Someone had forwarded a grainy photo of me and Vivian on the dance floor. My hand on her back, her head tilted toward me, both of us smiling like we meant it. The caption read, Ice Queen's got a new toy. I felt the blood drain from my face. The photo wasn't scandalous, but in a company like ours, it was enough to start a fire. By the next morning, the rumors were everywhere. People stared as I walked to my desk, their whispers trailing me like smoke. Sleeping his way to a promotion, someone muttered. She's twice his age, another sneered. I kept my head down, focusing on my monitor, but my hands shook as I typed. Then an email from HR landed, meeting. 2 p.m. urgent. My heart sank. I knew what this was about. When I walked into the conference room, the air was thick with tension. 2 HR reps sat across from me, their faces blank. Vivian was there, too, seated at the far end of the table, her expression unreadable, her hands folded tightly in her lap. No one spoke for a moment, and the silence was deafening. Liam, the head of HR, began. We've received reports of inappropriate behavior at the gala. The photo circulating suggests a conflict of interest. We need to investigate. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words stuck. What could I say? That it was fake? That she'd asked me to pretend it sounded ridiculous even to me? I glanced at Vivian, waiting for her to say something, anything. But she just sat there, her eyes fixed on the table, her lips pressed into a thin line. The HR rep continued, Given the optics, we're suspending you pending review. Effective immediately. Suspended. The word hit like a punch. I looked at Vivian again, desperate for a sign she'd fight for me, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and walked out without a word. Back at my apartment, I was furious. I paced the living room, the photo from the gala burned into my mind. How could she just sit there? How could she let them tear me apart like that? I grabbed my phone and typed out a message to her. You let them bury me. Was it all just a game I hit, send then threw the phone on the couch? No reply came. Hours turned into days and the silence grew heavier. I started job hunting, sending out resumes, but my heart wasn't in it. I kept replaying the gala, her laugh, her hand in mine, the way she'd looked at me like I was more than just an employee. Had I imagined it? Had I been a fool to think it was real? A week later, I got a call from a buddy in the analytics department. You hear about Vivian? He asked. I hadn't. I'd been avoiding anything to do with the company. She resigned, he said. Fought the board tooth and nail, said she wouldn't let them ruin you. They wanted to fire you outright, but she took the hit instead. She's gone, man. My chest tightened. Resigned Vivian Hart, the woman who'd built that company from the ground up, walked away from me. I tried calling her, but her number was disconnected. I went to her condo, a sleek high-rise downtown, but the doorman said she'd moved out. No forwarding address. She'd vanished, and I was left with nothing but guilt and questions. I spent weeks searching for her. Social media mutual contacts, even the coffee shop she'd mentioned, liking nothing. The anger faded, replaced by a hollow ache. I'd been so quick to judge her silence, but she'd sacrificed everything to protect me. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her strength, her vulnerability, the way she'd trusted me that night in the supermarket. I'd fallen for her, not the CEO, but the woman who'd let me see her cracks. And now she was gone, and I didn't know if I'd ever get the chance to tell her. One night I found myself back at the supermarket where it all started. It was late, the aisles empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing like they had that first night. I wandered to the wine section, not sure why, maybe chasing a ghost. And then I saw her. Vivian standing by the Reds, holding the same bottle of Cabernet we'd pretended to pick out months ago. Her hair was down her face, bare of makeup, and she looked tired, smaller somehow, but still beautiful. My heart stopped. I took a step forward, my voice barely a whisper. Vivian. She turned, and for the first time I saw her eyes light up. The fluorescent lights of the supermarket buzzed above us, casting a harsh glow over the wine aisle where Vivian stood, clutching that familiar bottle of Cabernet. Her eyes met mine wide with surprise, then softened into something warmer. Something real. She wasn't the ice queen anymore, not the CEO who'd commanded boardrooms, or the trembling woman who'd grabbed my hand months ago. She was just Vivian, tired, unguarded, and standing there like she'd been waiting for me without knowing it. My heart pounded, but I forced my feet to move, closing the gap between us. The air smelled of cardboard and citrus, and outside the San Diego rain pattered against the windows, sealing us in this quiet moment. Liam? She said, her voice barely above a whisper, like she was testing if I was real. I didn't think I'd see you here. I managed to half smile, my hands shoved in my jacket pockets to keep them from shaking. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. She set the bottle down on the shelf, her fingers lingering on the glass as if she needed something to hold on to. I come here sometimes, she admitted. It's stupid, but it reminds me of that night. I nodded, my throat tight. Me too. We stood there, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. I wanted to ask 100 questions, where she'd been, why she'd left, how she'd walked away from everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, I heard what you did. You resigned. For me. Her eyes flickered a mix of guilt and defiance. I didn't have a choice, she said. They wanted to destroy you to save the company's image. I couldn't let that happen. I took a step closer, my voice low. You gave up everything, Vivian, your career, your life. Why? She looked away, her jaw tightening. Because you saw me. Not the CEO, not the Ice Queen. Just me. And I couldn't let them take that from you. Her words hit me like a wave, washing away the anger and regret I'd carried for weeks. I'd been so caught up in my own hurt, I hadn't seen what she'd sacrificed. I was pissed at you, I admitted, my voice rough. In that meeting when you didn't say anything, I thought you'd thrown me under the bus. She flinched, but her eyes met mine again, steady now. I know. I wanted to fight for you, but I had to choose the only way I could keep you safe. I'm sorry, Liam. I should have told you. I shook my head. No, I should have trusted you. The rain outside grew louder, a steady drum against the glass, but we didn't move. I reached out my hand, brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. Her fingers were still cold but not trembling this time. That night in the supermarket, I said, "You told me to stop pretending, so I'm done. This is real. I love you, Vivian. Not the act, not the gala. You." Her breath caught, and for a moment I thought she'd run just like she'd vanished before. But she stepped closer, her hand tightening around mine. "I love you too," she whispered, and it scares the hell out of me. We stood there in the middle of the wine aisle holding hands like we were the only two people in the world. The fluorescent lights flickered and the air smelled faintly of her perfumed jasmine and cedar, same as that first night. I laughed softly, breaking the tension. "So what are we now?" She tilted her head, a small smile curving her lips. "Two people who don't need titles or roles. Just us living honestly." I raised an eyebrow. "And if someone asks why I love you?" She stepped closer, her hand brushing my cheek, her touch warm and sure. "Tell them it's because I made you act better than you ever thought you could." Her smile widened and I laughed, the sound echoing in the empty aisle. It was the same laugh we'd shared in the elevator after the gala, but this time there was no fear, no pretense. I pulled her into my arms and she melted against me, her head resting on my chest. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle and the world felt new, like the city had been washed clean for us. We didn't kiss, not yet. It wasn't about grand gestures or movie moments. It was about standing there holding each other, knowing we'd found something worth keeping. As we walked out of the supermarket, her arm linked through mine, the parking lot glistened under the streetlights. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and salt from the nearby ocean. "What's next?" I asked, glancing at her. She looked up at me, her eyes bright despite the dim light. "We start over," she said simply. "No boardrooms, no rumors. Just us." I nodded, my hand tightening around hers. "I can live with that." We reached her car, the same black BMW from the gala night, but it didn't feel like a symbol of her old life anymore. She paused, turning to face me. "You know," she said, her voice playful, "you still owe me a bottle of wine." I grinned. "And you still owe me a dance that doesn't end with a photo leak." She laughed, that warm, unguarded sound I'd fallen for, and for the first time I felt like we were free. Free from the company, from the rumors, from the weight of who we were supposed to be. We were just Liam and Vivian, two people who'd been broken by the world but found each other in a supermarket aisle. And as we drove away into the rain-soaked night, I knew that was enough.